I found my son sitting on a bench outside Gate C at the airport, not waiting for a flight, just sitting there, with 2 bags at his feet and my 6-year-old grandson asleep across his lap, little sneakers dangling off the edge of the seat. My son looked up when he heard my heels on the tile, and for a second I didn't recognize his face, not because he'd changed, because I'd never seen him look that defeated. I didn't say anything. I just held out my hand. He took it. That was 3 months ago, and I want to tell you how we got there and what I did about it, because I've been thinking about it every single day since, and I think some of you need to hear it. My name is not important. What I am is a 63-year-old woman who built a small real estate management company from a 2nd bedroom and a landline in 1991, who raised 2 kids mostly alone after my husband passed, who can parallel park a truck and read a financial statement in the same afternoon, and who has learned, the hard way, more than once, that the people who underestimate you are always the ones who end up surprised. My son, Theodore, I call him Teddy, met his wife 7 years ago at a work conference in Denver. She was charming, I'll give her that. Beautiful in a way that made you feel slightly underdressed just standing next to her. Smart too, or at least good at performing smart, which I've come to understand is a different thing entirely. Her name was Gretchen. I want to be fair about Gretchen because fairness matters to me. In the beginning, she was genuinely kind to Teddy. She made him laugh. She pushed him to finish the renovation business he'd been half-heartedly starting for years. She was there when his sister got sick and things were hard for our whole family. I thought she loved him. I want to be honest, I believed that. Her mother was a different story from day one. Her mother, I'll call her what Teddy called her, which was just her mother, because that woman was never interested in being called anything warm by our family. Her mother had opinions about everything. About where Teddy and Gretchen should live, about what kind of work was stable enough, about how Gretchen's first marriage had failed because of a man who didn't know how to provide properly, and how she would not see her daughter repeat that mistake. She said that last part directly to me. At an Easter dinner, with sweet potatoes on the table and my grandson Eli sitting 3 feet away playing with a plastic dinosaur, I smiled and passed the rolls, but I noted it. Teddy's renovation business grew faster than anyone expected, honestly. He had a gift for seeing what a space could become, not just what it was. He could walk into a gutted kitchen and tell you exactly what needed to happen, in what order, for how much. He was good with people. Clients trusted him. By year 3, he had 6 crews and a commercial contract with a hotel chain that kept him busy through the winter months, which in the renovation business is the real measure of success. Gretchen handled the books. She had an accounting background, and Teddy trusted her completely. That's the part I keep coming back to. He trusted her the way you trust family, which meant he trusted her without checking. Her mother joined the company in year 4. Office manager, technically. Gretchen said it was temporary, just to help with billing during a busy quarter. I said nothing. I watched. The busy quarter became a year. The year became 2. Her mother had keys to the office, access to the scheduling system, and a parking spot with her name on a little placard that Gretchen had made without telling Teddy. I noted that too. Teddy called me on a Tuesday evening last October. I was making tea and watching the news with the volume low. He said, "Mom, I think something's wrong." He didn't sound panicked. He sounded like a man who had been trying to talk himself out of something for a while and had finally stopped being able to. He told me he'd gone into the office on a Saturday to pick up some files and found a set of invoices he didn't recognize, vendors he'd never hired, amounts that didn't match any work that had been done. He'd tried to bring it up with Gretchen and she'd explained it away. Rounding errors, a new software system, a bookkeeping method her mother had suggested that was actually more efficient. He said she had an answer for everything, and the answers made sense while she was saying them. But afterward, I couldn't remember why. I know that feeling. I'd felt it in my first marriage briefly before I understood what it meant. I said, "Teddy, don't touch anything. Don't ask any more questions. Don't let on that you're worried. "Can you do that?" He said he thought so. I said, "Good. I'm going to make a call." The call I made was to a woman named Harriet, who had been my accountant for 19 years and who had, in that time, helped me navigate 2 audits, one dishonest contractor, and a property dispute that got genuinely ugly before it got resolved. Harriet was 71 years old and had the energy of someone who'd been slightly annoyed at the world since 1987 and had found that useful. I trusted her with my life. I asked her if she knew anyone who did forensic accounting. She said, "I do it myself when the situation calls for it." I said, "The situation calls for it." We met at my kitchen table that Friday. I had Teddy send me everything he could pull quietly. 3 years of invoices, bank statements, payroll records, the vendor contracts. He sent them from a personal email, not the company account. Harriet sat at my table with reading glasses and a legal pad and went through it all while I made coffee and tried not to hover. By Sunday afternoon, she looked up at me and said, "Gloria." "That's my name, Gloria." She said, "This is not rounding errors." Over the course of 4 years, money had been moving out of Teddy's company in small enough amounts that no single transaction would raise a flag, but consistently enough that when you added it up across the full period, it came to just under $400,000. Some of it went to vendors that didn't exist, shell companies set up with addresses that turned out to be mail forwarding services. Some of it went directly into an account that Gretchen had opened in the company's name, but with herself as the sole signatory, which is the kind of thing that requires paperwork and intention and does not happen by accident. Her mother had been the one processing most of the payments. I sat with that number for a long time. $400,000. That was Teddy's cruise. That was his hotel contract. That was the years he'd worked 7 days a week and skipped vacations and fixed problems at midnight because the job mattered to him. I was not angry. I want to be clear about that because people always expect the anger part. I was cold. There's a difference. Anger makes you move fast and careless. Cold makes you precise. I called a lawyer I knew, real estate primarily, but he had a colleague in financial fraud, a woman named Sandra, who agreed to meet with us the following week. I said to Harriet, "Don't tell Teddy the full number yet." She looked at me. I said, "He'll react. He needs to not react yet." She nodded. She understood. Here is what I did not know until later, while Harriet and I were sitting at my kitchen table. Gretchen and her mother had already started the next part of their plan. Gretchen had been speaking with a family attorney. She had documented, carefully and over several months, a version of events in which Teddy was an erratic, unreliable business partner, absent, emotionally volatile, resistant to professional advice. She had emails, some real and some I believe were constructed, that supported this narrative. She had a friend who was willing to sign a statement corroborating it. Her mother had done the same from her position inside the company. The plan, as best we later reconstructed it, was to force Teddy out of his own company. Not all at once. Gradually. Paperwork first, then a formal dispute, then a buyout offer at a fraction of the actual value. They had presumably expected him to be so confused and beaten down by the time it was formalized that he'd take whatever they offered just to make it stop. What they had not accounted for was that Teddy called his mother. The night everything broke open was a Wednesday in late November. Teddy had come home from a site visit to find the locks on the house changed. His key wouldn't work. He rang the bell for 10 minutes. Gretchen came to the door and told him, through the glass, that she'd spoken with an attorney and that she was initiating divorce proceedings, and that he should have his things removed within the week. She said it the way you'd tell someone their subscription had been canceled. Ellie was in the house. Teddy asked to see him. She said no. He called me from the driveway. I could hear him trying to keep his voice steady and not quite managing it. I said, "Drive to the airport." He said, "What?" I said, "I've already booked you 2 tickets. I'm coming to you. Meet me at Gate C, Delta Terminal. Get Eli from school first. You have every right to pick him up, and she hasn't filed anything yet, so do it now." He went and got his son from school. He packed one bag while Gretchen was, apparently, on the phone. And he drove to the airport and sat on a bench with his little boy asleep across his lap and waited for me. I was on the first flight out. I don't sleep well on planes, but I was calm. I had the folder from Harriet in my carry-on. I had Sandra's number saved. I had a plan. When I walked through that terminal and saw my son on that bench, something shifted in my chest that I don't have a clean word for. Not grief, not rage, something older than both. The particular feeling of a mother who understands exactly what was done to her child and has already decided what comes next. I held out my hand. He took it. We spent that first night in a hotel. Eli slept between us in the big bed and woke up at 6 asking for pancakes, which is the grace of being 6 years old. The world is still mostly pancakes and questions and whatever cartoon is on, and the adult earthquake happening around you hasn't fully registered yet. Teddy told me everything over coffee while Eli ate. All of it. Not just the money. The pattern. How slowly it had happened. How there was always a reasonable explanation. How he'd started doubting his own memory of events. His own read of situations. His own judgment. How her mother would make comments in front of staff that he'd feel foolish for objecting to, so he wouldn't and then feel foolish for not objecting to. I know that pattern. I said, none of that was your failure. I want you to hear me say that directly. He looked at his coffee cup. He nodded once. I said, but we have work to do, and it needs to start today. Sandra, the fraud attorney, filed a civil complaint within the week. The forensic trail Harriet had built was thorough enough that Sandra called it, and I'm quoting her here, unusually clean work. The shell companies had been sloppy. The mail forwarding addresses were traceable. The account Gretchen had opened had a paper trail that any competent investigator could follow, and several of the falsified invoices had metadata errors that showed the documents had been created years after the dates printed on them. Gretchen's attorney, it turned out, had not been told about the financial side of things. When it surfaced, there was apparently a period of what Sandra diplomatically called re-evaluation on their end. The divorce proceedings became complicated very quickly for Gretchen. Her mother, facing potential liability of her own, retained separate counsel. They stopped presenting a united front almost immediately, which is the thing about schemes built on mutual benefit. The moment the benefit is threatened, so is the unity. I want to tell you about the moment I knew it was going to be all right. It was a Saturday in January, about 2 months after the airport night. Teddy and Eli had been staying in my house. Eli had claimed the guest room and put a drawing of a dog on the door to mark it as his. Teddy was slowly starting to look like himself again. Sleeping more, talking more, laughing sometimes in the kitchen in the evenings. We were all 3 of us out in the backyard. Nothing special. Eli was kicking a ball around near the fence. Teddy was sitting in a lawn chair with coffee watching him. I said, "You know you're going to rebuild it." He looked at me. I said, "The business, you built it once. You know how. And this time, you know what to look for." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Her mother put a placard with her name in the parking lot." I said, "I know." He said, "Who does that?" I said, "Someone who thought the parking lot was going to be hers for a long time." He laughed. Actually laughed, a real one, the kind that surprises you. And Eli heard it and laughed too without knowing why, just because his father was laughing, and the sound of the 2 of them out there in the January yard is something I will keep for the rest of my life. The civil case settled 8 months after we filed. I won't share the specific terms because that's Teddy's business, but I'll tell you it was not the fraction of value that Gretchen and her mother had planned to offer him, not remotely. Teddy got the company name, the commercial contracts, the equipment, and enough in settlement to cover the damages, plus the cost of the legal process. Gretchen's attorney had advised her strongly to settle, and she did. Her mother settled separately under conditions that included a formal acknowledgement of liability. The parking placard, I was told, had been removed. Teddy relaunched formally in the spring. He called the company the same name because it was his name and it had always been his name, and he saw no reason to cede that too. He hired his first new crew within 3 weeks. The hotel chain, which had been on hold, watching, called him back before the ink was dry on the settlement. Eli started second grade. He drew a new picture for his door. A dog and what I believe is meant to be a spaceship, though I haven't asked for clarification. I'm telling you this because I know some of you are living inside the part of this story that happens before the airport. The part where everything feels slightly wrong, but the explanations are just plausible enough that you start questioning your own sense of things. The part where you're sitting across from someone who is dismantling something you built, and they're smiling while they do it, and you can't quite find the language for what you're watching. I want you to know, you're not wrong. That feeling in your stomach is not anxiety. It's information. And I want you to know something else. The people who underestimate you, the ones who see your trust and your love and your patience and think it means you're not paying attention, they are always surprised. They are always surprised because they have mistaken your kindness for unawareness. They have mistaken your patience for passivity. They don't realize that some of us have been paying attention the entire time. My son called me from a driveway with a voice that was trying not to break, and I got on a plane, and I had a folder, and I had a plane, because that's what you do. You don't fall apart. You don't retaliate carelessly. You gather what you know. You find the people you trust. And then you move. Teddy asked me once, during that long winter, how I'd known so quickly what to do. I thought about it for a while. I said, I didn't know right away. I knew what not to do. Don't panic. Don't tip your hand. Don't let them see you coming. I looked at him. The rest followed from there. He nodded slowly. Outside, Eli was chasing something across the yard. A butterfly, maybe, or just the afternoon light. Hard to tell at that age. Everything looks worth running toward. I watched him for a while, and I thought about the parking placard, and I thought about the $400,000, and I thought about a woman who had looked across an Easter table and told me, essentially, that my son was not enough. And I thought, you should have learned who you were dealing with before you decided to start. If you're watching this and something about it sounds familiar, if you're in the driveway or the airport bench, or that long, confusing middle part where nothing is quite adding up, please don't wait as long as my son did. Call someone you trust. Show them what you're seeing. Don't try to make sense of it alone. You deserve someone who will get on a plane. And if there are any mothers watching, your children will sometimes protect you from what's happening to them because they don't want to worry you. They will wait too long. They will try to handle it themselves. They will sit on a bench with their bags and their sleeping child and hope it somehow resolves. Go find them anyway. You'll know where to look. I've thought a lot about what made this possible. Not the legal part. Sandra handled that. Not the forensic accounting. That was Harriet. I mean the part before all of that. The part where Teddy called me instead of giving up, and I answered instead of panicking, and somewhere between those two things, the whole direction of the situation changed. I don't think that happens by accident. I think it happens because of choices people make long before the crisis arrives. Gretchen and her mother made choices too, small ones at first, easy to justify, easy to hide. A show company here, a falsified invoice there, a parking placard with a name on it that didn't belong. Every one of those choices was a brick they were laying, and they kept laying them because no one stopped them. And no one stopped them because they had decided very early on that no one would. That's the thing about people who do what they did. They don't pick targets randomly. They look for trust. They look for someone who loves fully and checks rarely. Someone who believes the explanation because they want to believe it. Because believing it is easier than the alternative. Teddy trusted Gretchen with his books and his business and his future because that's what you do when you love someone. That wasn't weakness. That was him being exactly who he is. The failure was not his. But here's what I've come to understand. About Teddy, about myself, about the years I spent building something from nothing in a second bedroom with a landline and no guarantees. The same qualities that make you vulnerable to people like that are the qualities that let you survive them. The patience, the steadiness, the willingness to do the work without needing anyone to see you doing it. Teddy built his business that way. And when it was taken from him, he rebuilt it the same way. That's not coincidence. That's character, and character accumulates. It doesn't disappear just because someone tried to take advantage of it. What Gretchen and her mother didn't understand, what people like them almost never understand, is that there's a difference between someone who doesn't see what's happening and someone who is choosing the right moment to act. They mistook Teddy's trust for obliviousness. They mistook my silence for acceptance. They built their whole plan on a foundation of underestimating us. And when the foundation gave way, they had nothing left to stand on. I'm not a vindictive person. I don't enjoy what happened to them, not the way some people might expect a story like this to end. With celebration, with satisfaction, with someone standing over the wreckage feeling righteous. I felt none of that. What I felt when it was over was something quieter. Relief. And a particular kind of clarity that comes when you've done something hard and done it right. Eli drew a picture of a dog and what I believe is a spaceship and put it on his door. Teddy got his company back. The hotel chain called before the settlement was dry. That's what I want to leave you with. Not a neat lesson with a number attached to it, but just this. The choices compound. The ones Gretchen made compounded into consequences she couldn't undo. The ones Teddy made, to call, to trust, to get back up, compounded into something he gets to keep. And the ones I made years ago, to build carefully and stay calm under pressure and know who I could trust. Those were the ones that mattered when it counted. You don't know in the moment which choices those will be. You just keep making the right ones and hope they're there when you need them. They usually are.